Night. My name is Robert Case, and the story I would like to tell you tonight is called Choice and the Road Taken. Two roads diverge in a woods, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. Famous words, right? By the poet Robert Frost. And they're written from the perspective of a man looking backwards. It's a man, he's beyond his prime. He's looking backwards on the course of his life, and he's thinking about some decision that he made a long time before, some insignificant place and time, and yet that one choice and the actions that he took seemed to guide the destiny of his life. Well, here's another famous line. See if you can recognize this one. I could have been somebody. I could have been a contender. Instead, I'm a bum. Anybody recognize that one?
Marlon Brando on the waterfront.
Yes, exactly. Marlon Brando on the waterfront. And once again, it's a man, and he's past his prime. He's looking back on the course of his life at another decision point, and the choice that he made, except from this decision point on, his life gets smaller and smaller. So I want to know, what is it about these choice points? And both of those well-known lines, those come from a man looking back. What do those choice points look like at the time? Well, for that, I want to turn to an old Russian fairy tale and see what kind of guidance that can provide. And it goes something like this. You may have heard this beginning before. It starts off with the words, once upon a time. Once next to a time. Once below a time, once above a time, once before time is counted the way that it is counted today. Once in that time, there was a kingdom. And in that kingdom, there was a mighty king. And in that kingdom, there was a young hunter, and the hunter had a horse. And the horse was a horse of power. It had a great, wide chest. Its hooves were of iron. Its eyes of fire. There are no horses like that these days. But the young hunter, he had one, and he was riding it through the forest. On a beautiful spring day, there were buds on the trees. They were just starting to open up. And in the early morning sunlight, the trees, they just shone resplendent in the sun. And there were little blue and yellow flowers peeking their heads up through the forest floor. He could hear the four-legged creatures going through the forest. But he could hear no birds. And he wondered why it was that no birds were singing. And then he looked up ahead on the trail and he saw what it was. There was a single curving feather laying there on the trail. And he saw that feather and he knew what it was, because it was a feather of gold, and in the early morning sunlight the light just seemed to radiate off of it as if it were a flame, and he knew there was only one place that feather could have come from. It had to come from the burning breast of the great firebird. And he knew why it was the birds were not singing, because the bird must have recently flown across the sky over that forest and dropped that feather and caused all the lesser birds to stop singing. And he rode that horse of power right up to where that feather lay on the trail, and he leaned back in the saddle. He put his weight into his stirrups, and they came to a stop right there. The young hunter sat there on the horse, and he looked down at that feather. The horse of power spoke, and he said, "Do not pick up that feather. If you pick up that feather, it's the start of the weeping. If you pick up that feather, you will know the meaning of fear." Still, the young hunter, he looked down at that feather, and he thought to himself, if I pick up that feather, I can take it to the king. And since there is no king on the wide earth with a single feather from the burning breast of the great firebird, the king, he would look upon me with honor. And who does not want to be held in the gaze of the king? But still, the horse of power had said to pick up that feather is the start of the weeping, but then there's that issue with the king. So the young hunter, he sat there on the broad, strong back of that horse of power, which is a very comfortable, safe place to be, and he thought about jumping down to pick up that feather, but he just couldn't make up his mind. So I wonder, man, what would you do? Is it time to pick up that feather?
No.
or is it not? Is it time to pick up that feather, or is it time to heed the advice of others? Sir, what do you think?
Pick up the feather.
Pick up the feather, he says. Is it time to learn of fear, or is it time to heed the horse of power? I don't know the answer to this question. I'm just a storyteller. I think, though, that the answer to that question lies within each one of you. And I do know this. There are times when it is absolutely right not to pick up that feather. But there are other times when that feather is the destiny of your life, and not to pick it up is to become smaller and smaller. And my name is Robert Case. I want to thank you all very much for listening. I do have a book, and it's called Daedalus Rising. You heard Kathy talking about it a little bit. I tell stories. I use a lot of old fables and myths, and have a lot of fun doing it. Thank you very much.
Keep it going for Robert. Come on.